Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good trivia questions. A lot of good answers there. Yeah. Our guest today is Dr. Ronna Vanderslice. She serves as Vice Provost for Academic Affairs, Oklahoma State University System and Provost, and the OSU Polytech. She actively collaborates with OSU Polytech campuses to ensure that processes are aligned and that high-quality academic programs and services are provided for our students. She previously served a 10-year term as Vice President for Academic Affairs at Cameron University in Lawton. She served as Dean of the School of Education and Behavioral Sciences and Project Director at Southwestern Oklahoma State University and been the chair there of the department for 6 years. She got her doctorate and her master's from Texas Tech University. She also earned a master's degree in school counseling from East Central University in Ada, bachelor's degree from Southwestern in Weatherford. We're glad to have her with us today. Please help me welcome Ronna Vanderslice.
Yeah, great, thanks. Thank you. I was kind of sitting on the edge of my seat waiting to hear what all the jobs were today, because I do. It's different kind of every day. So anyway, does anybody even know what a provost really is or does? I thought maybe I should just start there. It's a good start, isn't it? So I've been a provost for a really long time, but what we do is we are responsible for getting students into programs that they enjoy and can be successful at, keeping them in school through some support measures like tutoring, all the things it takes to keep them in school, and then getting them graduated in a reasonable amount of time. And reasonable, as you know, from maybe your own family, is all dependent on the person, right? So student success, we work around, all the people in the Provost and Academic Affairs work around all the pieces of student success. And so my new responsibilities now, and my new job is serving as Provost of OSU Polytech. And you may or may not have heard about it, but I want to tell you a little bit about it today. But when I was invited to come, they asked me to talk a little bit about higher education today and where it is and kind of where it's been going. And that really leads perfectly into OSU Polytech. So that's what I want to talk a little bit about. So first of all, many of you know that higher education is really in a different time right now. It's a time when the regular population is really questioning the value of whether a 4-year degree is really worth the debt that students acquire, and whether or not the benefit, the money that they will make in the career that they'll select, that they're going into, is actually going to be able to pay off for them. And so that's created really a lot of difference in higher ed. In the last few years, I'd say that's a really big difference. Students are ultra aware of this debt issue. As a matter of fact, I only have one daughter, and so I love to tell stories about her and all the things. So she dates a lot of guys, right? And so I'm not really proud of this, but she dates them a while, and then I fall in love with them, and she doesn't. And so there's this really great guy, and his name was Spencer. And he was so cute, and he was so great, and I really liked him. So I thought we were at that point where I should bring it up. So Sunday lunch, I said, hey, Spencer's nice. He's a good guy. He's got a good job. And you think he might be the one? And she looked at me like with this really dirty look, and she said, of course not. Mother, he has so much debt. I nearly fell out of my chair, right? Okay, I didn't ever think about that when I went to school. I certainly didn't know about the debt that guys that I dated had. So it really made me ultra aware of how all students are very aware of this now, and they're questioning in their mind, like, hey, if I take out these loans, am I going to be able to pay them off, right? Anyway, she didn't marry Spencer. I was really disappointed, but she wasn't. So, There's been really, when we look at higher education now, a lot more emphasis on careers. So when we went to school, if you went to college and you walked up to an advisor, somebody asked you, what do you want to major in, right? What do you want to major in? That's not the words now. The words now are, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? Focused on really like careers and what kind of jobs are out there. And some careers or some majors, that's a little more difficult to answer, right, than others. So real emphasis on careers. Also, just a lot of demand now for non-degree training. And I want to talk a little bit more about that later. Kristen's job in Oklahoma City is focused around this non-degree training, and she stays very busy by providing services to businesses, companies, industry partners who are not interested. They don't care if the people they're hiring have certain degrees. They want them trained. So very different. Very, very different. And only one more of my daughter's stories. I have a million, but this is only one more that really, really drives this home. And that is that she did an internship when she was in school with the Thunder. And when she went, they all showed up for their internship, and they stood them out in the hallway, and then they were in the room, and then they opened the doors. They had the interns come in and sit down, and they said, look, we aren't going to ask you what you got your degree in, what you're working on. We don't care about any of that. We are here to teach you the Thunder way of doing things. And so all that, they basically said, all that stuff they've been teaching you in school, you just leave that out there in the hallway where you started. And you sit down and let us teach you. So I think that's really just another really great just reminder of how things have shifted. So when we think about where we are in workforce, what does workforce need? They need workers. They cannot get skilled people to come to work and to keep coming to work and to stay there. And so what they want is very, very different than probably what we have experienced. And then there's this huge emphasis now on technology. Like, you have to know a lot of technical skills and technology skills in every job. It doesn't matter what that job is. It involves some technology. So really, just this perfect storm, this time when higher education was changing. And you may have remembered, or you may have heard about OSU Polytech as a response to all of these changing times and demands from the workplace. And probably, let me go forward, and then somebody will have to probably tell me how to go back. But in December of 23, many of you might know that President Schrum did a huge release about OSU Polytech. And this, the presentation was done in Tulsa. She did it with a lot of industry partners. It was a really great kickoff. There's still videos out there. You can watch it. But it was really asking them, what do you need, and how can OSU help you with those needs that you have in the workplace? And we focused in that launch. She talked about some key areas in Oklahoma where we are really, really suffering for a trained workforce. And I have those areas up there. I won't take the time to go through them. Let me see if I can go back now. So I thought maybe it would be good if I talked a little bit about, well, what even is OSU Polytech? Because a lot of people don't even know what that really is. So OSU Polytech are the programs that we offer that focus on technical skills, which in ways where we teach with experiences or hands-on learning, and they're all in STEM fields. So all of the programs in Polytech are focused around whatever are needed in the workforce. So when you hear about workforce needs, you may have heard about them in some of these areas that I showed you. But I was wondering, if you'd ever heard of some of these polytech programs and if you know what some of them are. So OSU has I know that we all think in this room that OSU Stillwater is our shining star, and it is here, but OSU in Stillwater focuses on 4-year degrees, master's degrees, doctorate degrees. This polytech emphasis is focusing more on people who have associate degrees, and mostly AAS degrees, associates in science, in applied sciences. And those programs are what we call terminal degrees, which mean people are going to finish those 2 years and they're going right to work. So do you know any of the programs that are these polytech programs in either Oklahoma City or Okmulgee? Have you ever heard of any of them? Yeah, shout one out. There did used to be a watchmaking program. They don't have that anymore because the needs for that shifted. But you're right. They had a watchmaking program in Okmulgee. What are some of the others? Shout them out.
I think they had an automotive
They do.
skill program and still do, I think.
We do. We have a number of automotive training programs. We have diesel mechanics. We have Mopar, Ford technician program where people work in the Ford training facility on our campus in Okmulgee, and then they go straight to work as soon as they get through that program. And so many of the nursing counts as that program. It's a STEM field. We teach it in an applied way, which means they get hands-on actual learning. We have biomanufacturing. We have engineering technologies, and that's like fixing things. When you really get down to it, we call it instrumentation, which I didn't fully understand. But what that means is you can work on equipment at many facilities. So those are some of the programs. So those two schools are OSU Polytech, OSU IT in Okmulgee, and OSU OKC, along with our Tulsa campus, but only when we offer those programs, usually from Okmulgee there. And I'll talk more about that to help you understand that. So we have a function that we're assigned those two schools, and they are to provide lower division courses, those lower level courses, and we can only offer Bachelor of Technology degrees, whereas here they offer Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Arts. These are all focused on technology, so really different. We also, though, if you'll notice, we focus on certificates, and so I want to talk just a little bit about that next. So when we think about all the different pathways to success in Polytech, it's maybe different than what you're used to, because for most of us, it was finishing the degree. We couldn't wait to get the degree, right? But when we look at in Polytech, we look at how can we take or how can we leverage those students who are taking those non-credit programs, and how can we use those to funnel them into what we now call a micro-credential. A micro-credential, new thing, a micro-credential is either it's associated with no credit whatsoever or up to 9 hours of credit. And the idea is that you would stack these credentials. So for a person who's out, like a person we have in Oklahoma City, 70% of our students in Oklahoma City are working full-time and coming back to school. They would come and they would take maybe a series of workshops, and they would get a micro-credential for that. And then maybe they wouldn't come back until the next semester to take another micro-credential. And those two micro-credentials together might be the equivalent of one class. So that's like 1 credit. And then they would stack micro-credentials together in order to get a certificate. And then they would take some additional hours and they would have an associate's degree. And then they would take additional hours and they could go on to the bachelor's degree. And some students will choose to come here to Stillwater. In some programs, they'll be interested in the research side. And so they'll come here and they'll work on their bachelor's here if they don't want the Bachelor of Technology. But all of those for us in Polytech are considered success, not just completion of a degree. So it's really different than what we have thought about before. So this summer, we did a series of roundtables all around Oklahoma with our industry partners, and we asked people, what skills do you need in a person who you're going to hire? And what skills do you need for the people who are already employed with you and who need some additional upskilling or training? It was absolutely an amazing experience, because what I thought we would hear when we went out and asked these engineers and all these business people, aerospace people, what do you need? So we thought, well, they'll probably tell us they need a little bit more physics, or they need a little bit more of, this specific kind of training. But that wasn't what we heard at all. I'm going to guess that if you have been in the workplace recently, what do people in the workplace lack? Students just coming out. Communication skills is one. Like how to solve a problem, how to work independently, how to, they certainly don't know how to lead a group. Like if they're a team leader, they don't know that. It's fascinating. These roundtables were extremely beneficial. I think that I'm calling those workplace skills, just a lot of workplace skills that students don't know. And if we don't teach them as they're going through our programs, they're not going to come out knowing them when they walk in the door at your workplace. So really has made us rethink, like, okay, we need to send them on more internships. We're making some curriculum changes in Oklahoma City to make our programs have internships. Our line worker program, there's a great need for that, but we didn't have any internships. So really focusing on that. Probably the most shocking story that I heard in the roundtables this summer came from Nordam in Tulsa. Yeah, in Tulsa. And the story one of the leaders at Nordam stood up. They're big OSU supporters, so they love us very much. But they said, I'll tell you what, we need you to teach students like basic workplace things. And so somebody said, like, what are you talking about? And he said, he said, show up for work was one. He said, well, one thing is that we had a student who came here to interview for a position this week, and he brought his mother. That's pretty hard to believe, right? I didn't ask if he got the job, so I'm not sure. Did he or she get the job? I don't know. But I think all of you, we're all laughing, right? Because it's pretty hard to believe, isn't it? I mean, but COVID just made this worse. Where if you had two people right here at this table and they were the students who were coming out today, they'd text each other instead of just talking. I mean, they just missed a lot. And so, I mean, it's not just that, but that's one piece. I mean, I don't think we can understand the impact of social media. I don't think we can understand a lot of it. But what we did learn from these, all these roundtables that we did, they were so beneficial to us. We learned that we've got to do things differently in our programs. And these Polytech programs emphasize these things that we learned. So, fantastic. So how? Well, I want to talk a little bit about that, because traditionally, I don't know if you know much about OSU IT in Okmulgee, but it has a phenomenal reputation. The students that come out of there go right to work. The Oklahoma Tax Commission tells us that the average earnings for those students in Polytech programs is $58,000 in their first year. That's not what we think. We got that data from the Oklahoma Tax Commission. So they're getting good jobs, those of us who went into teaching, education, more. I gulp every time I say that, right? I gulp every time I say that. But so all of us recognize that they're getting good jobs, but you had to go there in order to get these programs. That's how it's always been. We have dorms there. They're not great, but they're dorms. They live there, and we require them to. But what our new emphasis on Polytech, and a huge amount of my time and responsibility, is how do we make these wonderful programs accessible to people outside of Okmulgee? Because that place, just like Oklahoma City, mainly services an area, like just a circle right around it. So it's not accessible to all. So when we talk about modes of delivery, here's what I spend my days talking about. Okay, can we put that commercial air conditioner in the back of a trailer? And can we drive that thing to Oklahoma City? Can we drive it to Tulsa? How can we get hands-on experiences to students away from Okmulgee? Now, we're keeping those programs in Okmulgee. That's going to be for the students who want a traditional college experience, those residential, the students who can move, pick up, and live there. But there are tons of adult learners. That was one of the other trends I didn't talk about, but way more adult learners than we've ever had. They've been out there working, and now they're looking around going, I'm not making enough money working in the food industry or the retail industry or this industry, or I want to move up. So how do we make those programs accessible? How do we get labs in places where they can get them? Because the hands-on experiences are not something we're giving up. So it's how do we do it in different ways. I spoke about the program length and type, looking at micro-credentials and helping people understand that they can stack these credentials and increase their likelihood of getting a better job, increasing their salary. Course load. I talked a little bit about that. Non-credit. What we heard from a lot of the employers this summer was that they have given up on us doing the training, and they've started their own training programs. We talked to Quick Trip, and they are training their own air conditioning people because we can't produce enough of them. And so we're now working with them. We've been working since that roundtable. We've been working with them about, well, how are some ways we can use your facility, Aon in Tulsa? How are some ways we can use your facilities to do training? So really working on a lot of these expansion of these programs. Most people would tell you that OSU has always been and will always be a school that pays attention to what workforce wants. We are a land grant institution who really focus on students and their needs and what are they going to do when they finish those programs. And so been doing it a long time. We have a lot. We're growing that number. Our enrollment in Oklahoma City and in Okmulgee this semester is higher than it was last year. We're doing really great in both our credit and our non-credit programs. So I want to end with, how we really see all of these opportunities for us in OSU Polytech is how do we find something that students want to do, they're interested in doing it, and maybe you know a student who is not cut out for sitting in a classroom, taking lecture notes days on end. They learn by doing. That's what these programs focus on. And there are lots of students out there, and maybe it was you. Maybe it's your kid. I have so many people call and say, I think what you talked about today, I think that's my son. Usually boys, not always. We have great programs. We have Polytech programs and non-Polytech programs on both campus, and we have girls and guys in each one of those programs. But most of the people that reach out to me say, I have a smart kid, and he wants to learn to work on engines, and he can get a good job doing that. Why? Why can't he go to OSU? He can. So we're going to make those programs more accessible to people everywhere across the state of Oklahoma. We have a touch in every county, and our intention is to continue in the next few years to make you hear about, no matter where your hometown is, whether you're out from near the Panhandle like me, or wherever your hometown is, that you'll hear about these programs being accessible in those places. So I tried to end with enough time. Number one, I knew I had to end on time. I was threatened about that. But I wanted to leave enough time for questions, because you might really have something that might be beneficial, and I'm open to I'm a teacher, so I'll take any questions you have. Yes. How are these programs different from?
How are these programs different from Career Tech?
Fantastic. So I had a wonderful meeting with Mr. Haken a couple of weeks ago, where we talked about, her question is, how are these different from Career Tech? So our programs differ in, I think, some of them in depth and some of them in rigor. Our programs take students deeper into the learning, and they are probably more rigorous. So what we are working with Career Techs on, though, is if a student went through a program at a Career Tech, we're giving them prior learning credit for that and picking up, doing a bridge program to get them up to speed to where they need to be in our program. And then we're giving them prior learning credit, so they're not redoing any of that content anymore. It's a great question. We value those partnerships that we can have with Career Tech. They have a lot more money than we have, and they have wonderful equipment. Have you been there? I mean, they have wonderful equipment. They have a lot of things. So we want to leverage that, and we don't want people to redo credits. So that's how we're working with those programs. Another thing, okay, go ahead. I better take these questions before
What flipped the switch of generations of people knowing to come to work on time and not bring their mommy or daddy to their interview?
Yeah.
And we can't blame it on COVID.
It's not all COVID.
I mean, I had an interview one time with a girl that pulled the phone out and took a phone call, so that took care of that interview.
Yep.
And
Now, I'm
but
not
that
surprised
happened
over that.
towards the end. I mean, that was unheard of when I started this career. And then by the end, I'm worried about, and I had to take cell phones away from employees.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely. Yeah.
But what flipped the switch that
Well,
we can't do this on our own now?
Well, some people, well, I think really now, I want to say now, what Polytech's working on is, how do we get those people that are going out and going to work, how do we help them to learn that those things are not appropriate? And yes, it's true, we have to teach some of it now. So if that's the heart of your question, I think there's a lot of things. If you look at technology is one thing. I mean, I don't know, not only did I have a landline phone in Fargo, Oklahoma, where I grew up, but we had a party line when I was a kid. And I mean, and I have all the answers to, from a kid's perspective, all the answers I need are in my phone. They really have a total different, I mean, everything's just different about the way they think and learn and handle life, frankly.
What flipped?
Well, I think technology is one thing. I mean, technology is one piece of it. You know that many of us raised a generation of kid who we focused on self-esteem. I did that. Because when I was raising my kid, that's what they talked about. Being so important is like, you can't make them feel so bad about themselves. Okay, well, I grew up on a farm, and I was in trouble all the time. And I worked my tail off, and nobody cared how I felt about anything. And so, I mean, things have just changed, right? I think we just have to admit. I mean, and here's the one thing we can't do. We can't just say it's wrong the way they are, that they are our future. Like, we have to figure this problem out. They're going to work. Who's going to work if they don't work? I mean, we have to have people who will come to work. I mean, so we've got to focus on how do we change our thinking too. Yep, I'll take something.
Okay, so you mentioned the issue you have of doing this at places other than
Yes.
Okmulgee and OKC.
Yep.
But you also mentioned the facilities at Career. It's a follow-up to the question from over here. It just seems to me that there's a ready-made opportunity there because they're more dispersed, there are a lot more career techs,
Absolutely.
right, than there are MOGIs and OKCIT. So it seems to me that could be a mechanism to at least have your people use those facilities that are quite nice.
They are. They are. I completely agree with you, but here's what we don't want. We don't want the only pathway into these programs in those areas to be through career tech, because they don't have capacity. Like, they can't take all the people they have wait list. If you looked at what their legislative, what they were given money for last year, $26 million, it was to get rid of some of the wait lists they have. So not everybody that wants to go into career tech. So we don't want that to be our path. And we also, so we're not opposed to working with them in that way, but they are using those facilities themselves. And we don't want to tell an adult learner, the only way you can go in our program is through them. So we think that's a great option, but we don't want it to be the only pathway.
What about off hours, though? Are they also full off hours? I mean, if most of your students are working during the day, it seems to me if those facilities are available off regular daytime, nighttime, weekends, and all, underuse of facilities is a common problem in higher education.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know if they would be willing to just turn those over to us, but one of the responsibilities we have, if we're going to have a program in something, is we have to have the facility available to the students that come to us. So we're going to have to work that out ourselves. So we are going, but I promise you, we'll work with them in any way they allow us to.
You go ahead.
Oh, you're next.
First of
Then
all, I really applaud this Polytech creation. The thing that strikes me, however, is that the needs that industry have expressed are not new. And these needs have been in place, I would maintain, for decades. I grew up in England. In England, we had literally hundreds of polytechnical colleges.
Institutes, yes.
And the discussion at school was, are you going to a polytech, or are you going to a university, or are you going to go career tech equivalent? We call them technical colleges. So my question is, why has Oklahoma been so slow to create a secondary education system that speaks to these issues?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that question, because it's going to give me an opportunity to talk about one of the things I didn't get to talk about, which is a huge opportunity for us, which is what happens in high schools. So beginning in high school, most students decide, are you going to go to college, college bound, college track? You're going to go to career tech, and we can offer that we offer that in Oklahoma high schools during the day. Or are you going to go straight to work? And so I think that mentality starts in high schools. But I'll tell you what we believe. We believe that OSU Polytech, there is a real opportunity for us in high schools. Because students are getting to their final year of high school, and they're taking like office aid, and they're taking or they don't even go, like for a whole semester. And we could be there, and we could be offering this training to them. And we're piloting that program this semester with our fire program in Oklahoma City. We've had so much interest all across the state, from Altus to Woodward to Tulsa, all across the state, that, I mean, there are so many students who are very interested in getting this training so they go to work and get a better job. So I think that's a real opportunity for us, but I think it starts in high schools. That must mean my time is up. Thank you for the opportunity.
Almost. First of all, we believe in literacy here at Stillwater Frontier. We'll be donating a book to the library in your name. And thank you so much for your time today. And I assume you'll stick around and answer questions afterwards.
Absolutely. If I didn't get to your question, I'll be here as long as I need to. Thank you. Thank you.